Yes, welcome. This is A RAP CRITIC. I'm your boy Malik 16. And no, I ain't bone. You ain't bone. I hope you realize. But this is a super special episode because, man, y'all been listening to this man's music on this channel for going on a year and a half into 2 years. And I'm honored to finally get my boy up here, man. I'm gonna let him introduce himself. Who you be?
I appreciate you, yo. This Ill Lil. This is the only half of the best beer gang in the whole industry. You know what I'm saying? Super producer, beat man, extraordinaire. And that's it, man. I'm a music connoisseur. I love music. I love the arts. I understand it. I appreciate it, even if it ain't for me.
Yeah, and y'all see his name at the end of most of our episodes. We're probably two of the biggest Bone Thugs-n-Harmony fans you'll ever meet, and this is the man who single-handedly made me a fan, going way back to the year this album that we're talking about today came out, 1997. We're celebrating the 25th year of this album's existence. We're talking about none other than The Art of War by Bone Thugs-n-Harmony. A little background on this album that should be of note. For one thing, rumor has it that it was originally going to be called DNA Level C, which is Cleveland spelled backwards. Yeah.
They should have done that.
They should have done that.
DNA Level C. God damn, that's fire.
And it was released on August of 1997. Double album. And like we do every time when we review double albums on this channel, we're just going to focus on one disc at a time. We chose to do disc 2, side 2.
It's World War II. If you want to
Okay, thank you. We chose to do World War II side. So this is category 1, where we go over the product, the album itself, and let's get into it, man. Khalil, man, I'm excited. All right, so the first dimension we talk about in category 1 is dimension 1, the quality of the production. This would be pretty easy to talk about because, one, I have a producer here who can speak to all of the little nooks and crannies of production, but it's also easy because this entire double CD, this whole double album, was produced solely by DJ U-Neek, who's a longtime Bone Thugs beat provider and collaborator. A lot of people consider him the sixth member. So what can we say about the production on this album? What kind of instruments and sounds were they using?
First of all, I'm gonna say that DJ U-Neek showed his ass. I was listening to this again, obviously, in preparation for the show, and I was expecting the beats to not hold up, and I'm dissecting it, and I'm hearing these little bass lines, and I'm hearing the way the drums is hitting, and I'm like, oh no, this still hits. You know what I'm saying? If you want to listen to it, if you want to dissect it, what are you gonna hear? You hear a lot of spacey sounds. You get some organic sounds mixed in it.
I was gonna say the opposite of you. And so one thing we try not to do on this channel is compare albums to albums. So what I'll do is compare disc 2 and disc 1 periodically, because I feel safer comparing an album inside of itself. But because U-Neek was the beat provider, I think there's a hollowness that happens on the production here. It almost seemed like he switched his equipment for this album, and
I think he did. It feels like he did.
It feels like it. It actually, like most albums, sounds like some of it was recorded real early on, like right after Eternal, and some of it was recorded going towards the middle of the year. And
that's yeah. I mean, I don't know that sounds like it would be accurate.
You hear something like All Original, right? All Original sounds like something that would have been on the previous 2 albums. It's got that cryptic, dirty kind of murkiness to it. Some of the other beats, most of the production on this album sounds too clean. I mentioned this when we did the Wu-Tang Forever episode. RZA got new instruments and it sounded like a more polished kind of production when people had gotten used to what was this grimy murkiness. And I think Bone Thugs are experiencing the same things on this album. And the strings sound cleaner, the keyboards sound chimier, and there's just less of the
and there's more poppy drums and rhythms to it.
yeah.
And so but that's what I meant by he showed his ass. Like I mean, and I guess it's a good assessment, saying maybe he got some new software, new hardware, and everything, because hey, you got money now, right?
Mm.
And I said it's unique. You'll hear everything in there. So much different in there. It's like he was playing with it. Like, oh, this sounds fire. He can throw this in there. You know what I'm saying? Just like that. And so that's, to me, that's what I heard on the album. You pinpointed it good. It was sharp. It had very sharp, clean joints to it. And to me, it was electric, like electronic, more than organic. And then it had the organic kind of shuffled in the middle of it. It was, I think he showed his ass as a producer, bro. He showed a whole repertoire, like a lot of different types of beats on there.
I think that's what he was going for. I definitely think there's an experimental quality to this album, and we'll talk more about that in other dimensions. But it shows also on the production side as well as in what the rappers do on here. But like, if you're a deep Bone fan from the previous two albums, I could see how this could throw you off, especially when you get to tracks like Evil Paradise, which sounded like. You mentioned the word electric a bunch of times. That's
like exactly the song I was thinking about.
That sounded like dance pop, like something Cher would have sang over in the year 1997, or just something that would have wound up on Now That's What I Call Music CD series. All original and Whom Die They Lie are the most reminiscent.
But he's got dope elements, bro. He got some bass lines in there that rock, bro. He got drum patterns that rock. It's just that he's picking ting, 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 ting in the background. You know what I mean? It's not like soulful. It's not soulful.
Yeah, it's not.
Most
hit it on the nose.
I'm ready.
So your point was that there's dope elements to a lot of the tracks, even if the entire sound production isn't a memorable beat.
The sound selection, it's like he was unfamiliar with his sound bank. Like, not unfamiliar, but like he would pick the 10th hat he heard instead of going to he knew exactly which hat he needed to be on to get this feel. You know what I'm saying? He was slicing through sounds so he found the one that he thought was it, but there was way better sounds that he could have chosen from if you're looking for what I was looking for or what I think would be better production.
Yeah, Crazy said that they have more time to work on the songs on Eternal because they had those songs built up for years. They had, and U-Neek probably had these beats for years. And how producers get most of the lighter beats on here are gonna have chimey piano keys as their lead melody, which sound a little cheesy. It reminds me of like when Swiss Beats first started and people were accusing them of using Casio sounds. It sounded like somebody who just started playing with original strings that weren't sampled and trying to recreate Gothic, but not from a sample base. And this is producer 101. Hey kids, this might be how it sounds if you try to make a string arrangement from scratch and you're not a professionally trained musician and you're not sampling. So I think that's what we're getting there. And for the darker tracks, U-Neek tends to kind of strip it down. So a track like You Ain't Bone, when they're rapping, it's just the bass line and the drums. There's not a lot of melody. There's not a lot of anything. And this album is the first time you hear Bone rapping over breakbeat drums. Like U-Neek is incorporating classic hip hop breakbeat sounds. On the first side, the first song, Handle the Vibe, starts off with the drum pattern from a Boogie Down production song, Love's Gonna Get You. And then You Ain't Bone has that cascade, that rolling drum. I can't repeat the sound, but it's in there. So they're experimenting, and if you were looking for the familiar sound, you're not getting the modulation, you're not getting the laser sounds, you're still getting the wah-wah guitar every now and then. And another thing that is gone is some of the soulfulness. I do think
it came back in a few tracks.
Yeah, on the future, I think Hate Nation.
That's what I said. This was like an electronic type of feeling beat album, and Bone added the soul.
Yeah, it's like Hate Nation and Blaze It are the only times on this side, and then of course Mo Thug's Family Tree are the only songs on this side that they tap into. We get that, but there's moments where U-Neek experiments and blends the old with the new, and it works. Like Let the Law In and Thug Love, which is going down in history to become one of the most iconic hip hop beats of all time, because he used the shotgun sample in it. But I was listening to it the other day, even without the shotgun sample, the way that he was putting, the bass line, the way that he matched the melody with the bass line to emphasize it. He made it cinematic. It was like a game. It could be the soundtrack to Game of Thrones.
Did he Did he mix and master this album? I don't have the CD anymore. Because whoever did, they really captured that vibe, you know what I'm saying, that they was going for with that like spacey type, you know what I'm saying? Like you said, cinematic dramatics on songs like that.
It's only on a few of those songs where it's organic, but I think some of it is effort too. I mentioned some of those other beats being just stripped down and just a little simple kind of Casio key melody. On Thug Love, he's giving you this crazy bass line. He's stopping it. There's breaths. There's warp sounds in the background. Then there's a little key ding, 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 in the background for different parts. On everyone's verse gets a different beat breakdown. Have you noticed that?
Yeah. I noticed that in 1997. I was, you know what I'm saying? Back then, I was like, you know. Yeah, definitely, bro. Like it's I like that we're doing this so you know, I'm still alive to do this, whatever, how many 25 years later, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, listen, I used to listen to it like this, bro. I don't know if you remember, yo, I used to have this I used to have the CD player, bro, and it fell like the first day I had it on the train. And so you had to press it down to hear the whole, so you know, the full audio, the whole surround Dolby, whatever they had going at the time. But if you didn't press it down, you would only hear like the back track, like track number 75 out of 98. And you would only hear like these back frequencies, bro. And I would catch that because all I could hear, I wasn't holding this down all the time. All I could hear was, and I was like, oh, it changed now. Busy's rapping now. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I caught that shit back then.
Yeah, those things make a difference, man. Yo, that struggle that you just described. Kids, y'all could never feel our pain. Y'all can never relate to dropping a CD player, a Discman,
fresh out,
and having to tape it.
I remember having to buy two set of headphones in a day, or one in the morning, one coming home from school.
Yeah, it's no joke. It's no joke. But yeah, I mean, those are all the aspects of the production. You get in the mix here of the old and the new, and a lot of the new is going to be determined by how much effort could be perceived from listening to it. If it's just a stripped down kind of bass and drum line with a few kind of hollow keyboard instruments in the back, it may feel like you're not getting a full production sound. I think what might be missing here in the production is the fullness of some beats. Thug Love is a very full beat. Let the Law In is a very full beat. Untitled Chapter is a full beat. And some of the other songs, not so much. Get Your Thug On and so on. But something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. Young Lil, what you giving this on a scale from 1 to 5 for quality of production?
After listening to your, are we going with halves? Are we going with broken hearts? You broke my heart. I'm going to have to give it 3.5 on the production.
3.5, which takes us to the next dimension. The cohesiveness of the album, all that production and the lyrics together, how well does this album flow? And we're talking about the sequence here. How many tracks on this album?
13.
On this side?
13 or 14.
Yeah, I think it's 14 on this side because it went down.
Yeah, but they had that one extra track.
Yeah, it was like number 28 was the last track. So when we talk about cohesiveness in terms of this being a classic album, so I will say it starts off really strong and it ends pretty strong. You know, if you were excited about the next chapter of Bone Thugs with this whole Mo Thugs rollout, hearing the artists that they have, hearing them pretty much kind of remix the last song on the first side, which is Family Tree to Mo Thugs Family Tree, then it's like, oh, it's bringing it full circle. And then the beginning being the dark intro, which is reminiscent of more that dark style that Bone came in with. I know I get hyped every time I hear that. Mo down, mo down.
They turn out thugs.
But that's another
It's
example.
crazy.
That's another example of fuller production, like U-Neek really putting maximum effort in it. And
that was like 40 seconds though, man.
Yeah, it was a beat with different parts, even though it was just a skit. I almost wish it was a song that they rapped over because it had breakdowns.
It probably is too. It just didn't throw it on there, but
yeah, it had breakdowns. It had thunder and lightning. That's something you're gonna get all throughout the album too. A lot of thunder and lightning. The 4 songs. There's a few things that I think break up the cohesiveness, like how well does it flow and sound like an album instead of a bunch of songs thrown out. And so one thing that's big on that's noticeable even on the first disc, the World War I side, is Crazy Bone kind of taking this role of like being the glue for the whole group and the whole album. Like it seems like there were a couple. He
carried it.
So he has like 4 solos. He has 2 on disc 1 and 2 on this side. And you know, they frame some of them as interludes, but they wind up being solos. So on here is Blaze It and Neighborhood Slang, which it makes you wonder. It makes you wonder because one thing Khalil had pointed out to me when this album came out is that this is the first album where each member gets a solo, except for Flesh. If everyone's getting a solo, then let everyone get a solo. But then here having that Neighborhood Slang, which is kind of like a nod to Mr. Ouija, right? Because it's just like a chant over a dramatic drum roll. It's not really a full song. There's nothing special being said.
It's an interlude.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't even know why it was there, but I like it.
And Blaze It. And sure, if you're a Bone fan, you're gonna love it. But as an album, it starts to feel a little bit like, okay, crazy. So that kind of cuts into the flow of things. Because you wonder, okay, well, why wasn't this a song, or why wasn't everyone else on it, or why didn't someone else do the interlude just to give us that mix of voices again? Even the way it was spaced out. So I think those things are takeaways, and then it begs the question of, do you even need an interlude to begin with? You got all these songs. You got 14 songs already. It's already dangerous territory trying to make a classic album beyond 10 or 12 songs. 14 is like the max, except for special cases. We talk about this a lot on this channel. It's very hard to make classic albums that go well into those double-digit numbers. Does that make sense? I agree.
I mean, it's just a lot of material.
You just also increase the odds of there being stuff people don't like. The shorter album, you know, you kind of
more money, more problems. There's more stuff to look at if you show more.
Another thing, it also seems like the songs where they're talking about something are all at the end, and we'll talk about that more as we go on in Dimensions. But all these things are just something for y'all to consider on a scale from 1 to 5. Heartbeats, the cohesiveness. What you giving this, Lil?
I'll give it a 3. I'll give it 3.
Okay.
Because of all the things you mentioned. I mean, it's not exactly straight group work. I will say though, it definitely had a beginning and an end. You know what I mean? It had a clear intro and a clear, how you pointed out, and a clear exit. Yeah, absolutely. That is where they thrive. So, all right, that takes us to Dimension 3. The deepest part on this category is the question of the intentional mood and tone. So I always explain this like, this is not the mood you feel when you listen to it, because that can change. It's the mood that this album is trying to set and the tone of it all. I think they established that. What do you think that the tone is? Well, I think the tone is war, and all of that comes with it, the cause, the effect, and the aftermath. And I think they do that. You know what I'm saying? Break that down. Well, all right. So they had beef, right, with different rap groups and stuff like that. So for them, I guess they felt like they were targeted because they came out hard and they was with Easy, and he was in the middle of his own beef, and then he passed away, you know, for reasons that was very controversial at the time, and still, you know what I mean? And so they were in the middle of all of that, dealing with their own street shit, and then these had deaths left and right from what we were hearing. They were at war with themselves, with the streets, with the music industry, with the head of the record label. You know what I'm saying? So the album touched on all of that, and I guess we are just talking about this second one, but if you listen to the first album, it starts off, they're like, yo, set it off, nigga, what's up? Nigga, pop off. That was the tone of the album. That's how they set it off. And the very first verse on the first album, excuse me, I'm not supposed to talk about it, but Crazy must say, niggas, let me slow down the rhyme from time to time so y'all can figure out my mind because you can't understand how I rhyme. Like, this was slowed it down. Like, listen, y'all can't understand me. We have a problem. You know what I'm saying? That was what he was saying. Like, nigga, we have an issue. Let me slow this down for you, stupid. And that was the tone. And then they spoke about, you got to really listen to these niggas. They talk about, beef, you know what I'm saying? Like that. They talk about not liking people. They talk about was up judges and when they spot you on, it was on site before on site was a word, right?
Got you.
So, and then they wrapped it up like, oh, you got to destroy and rebuild, and with a nice melody. My family, oh, they mean so much to me. You know what I'm saying? So I think the tone was that, and war has all kinds of consequences, bro, on both sides.
Okay. That sounds very much like a lot of the stuff I saw in the articles written about this album at the time. It's funny that you bring up that line from disc 1 for World War I side. On Wasteland Warriors, Crazy starts the same way, and he's like, yeah, if I slowed it down,
I think that's around what
we biting your style, right? So
right, yeah.
In all those articles, the main criticism is that they spend a lot of time on this war mentality, beefing with all these clones, and we'll keep talking about this throughout the review. With some of the stuff that we touched on already, with it being a long album and a lengthy album, it's harder to lock down an official mood, especially when the beats go from everything to like Hate Nation to
Madonna.
You Ain't Gone to Evil Paradise. It's just, by the time Evil Paradise is there, you're like, whoa, you got, if there was a tone in the mood, you get taken out of it.
Yeah.
And I think Khalil hit everything on the nose. I think the intended tone that Bone was coming with is, we're ready for war. We're back to reclaim our style. Make no mistake, there's been a lot of rumbling of people saying they started our style. Prove it then. Win a Grammy then. Sell as many records. I think there's a lot on there. There's and a lot of Fight Me then, right? I think there's a line on there where Lazy says, 7 million, it has to show and prove. I know they told you to sign a record deal and be like Bone to get on, but don't do it. And then, of course, there's a lot of the volatile threats. Even their guests come in and start throwing the threats. Majesty was down for whatever.
That was fire, bro. I was hearing his verse just now before we got on, man. I'm like, I want to go like this again. You know what I mean?
But the actual mood, the affected mood from all of that, I just don't know if it's as tightly woven as they wanted it to be. It also sounds like a struggle for them to stay group-minded. And again, that could have just been something as simple as the sequence kind of rocking the mood off a little bit. I feel like on the first side, World War I, there's more songs with all of the prominent members together. This side, you get more flesh. I'll say that. You get more flesh and bone features on this side than you get on the first side. But there's just more tracks where you hear all their voices coming together. Here, it's, a little bit in the beginning, a lot more in the end, and broken up in the middle. And then one thing that gets exposed here, I think, is, and we'll talk about this more in category 2, but you start to see the weak links in the group more than you did on the previous albums. I think you realize that Wish is not your fast rapper. He's not really trying to do that anymore.
And it doesn't even matter. He's your Tony Yayo.
he's your Tony Yayo. So, some of the mood gets affected by the choices made production-wise, sequence-wise, and just by investing so much energy in war. But that's something for y'all to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. What you giving this for how they delivered the mood and tone?
Considering that when this album came out, rap had a lot of themes to it. You had to come out with a product, and your product couldn't be I'm from 171st Street, not 170th Street. Your product had to be different.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give this a 4 hearts.
All right, so that takes us to Dimension 4. Speaking of which, the repetition versus song distinction, or the song distinction versus repetition. How much did the production start sounding the same? How much did the rap start sounding the same in the themes? And if there was none, then cool.
Do me a favor, run me down the tracks, the names of them, so I can see them in my mind.
All right, so we got Mo Thug intro. It goes right to Thug Love, Hating Nation, Seventh Sign, Wasteland Warriors, and then it starts going into neighborhood slang. You ain't wrong, get your thug on, all original, Whom Da They Lie, Blaze It, Let the Law In, Friends, or How Many of Us Have Them, Evil Paradise, and then Mo Thug Family Tree.
Right.
I might have missed something.
Nah, you got it. It's perfect. There might be like, out of the 14 tracks, maybe like one instance where one track will run into another here and maybe one down here. You know what I'm saying? Like a couple of small instances of it. But other than that, the production switches up. Like,
but you see the fact that you just asked me to remind you of the tracks. A good album, you don't have to be reminded. U-Neek does, on his lazier moments, some of those same sounds because he's only relying on chimes, strings, and those hollow piano keys for a lot of the beats start to get forgettable, and you can easily mix up track 12 with track 5, you know, if you're not a Bone fan or you're not paying attention. At least 9 out of 14 songs dissing the competition, and not in new ways. It's not like one verse says something completely different than another verse. I think Busy starts to mention something in one of his verses. You're like, oh, I heard y'all say I was worshiping the devil. He gets a little intricate in one of those songs. I think that was
Whom Da They Lie.
Whom Da They Lie, right? But they actually start using the same words. Crazy Bone says ring the alarm on You Ain't Bone and on Evil Paradise. Just cuz, and you know, so some of that creates wear and tear on the listener. Again, if you're a fan, you're invested, you don't care, especially if you're a young fan, you'll eat up anything that's delivered. But when you look back with objective ears or mature ears, it's like, okay,
You're absolutely correct.
I heard this,
Absolutely.
I got this feel. So something for y'all to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats, the repetition factor. What you giving this on a scale from 1 to 5?
And the 1 to 5 on repetition.
Yep.
So
5
it's repetitive.
means,
It's repetitive, meaning
5 would mean not a lot of repetition.
yeah,
1
I would give
mean
this a 2. I would give it a 2. I would give it a solid 2.
All right, that takes us to Dimension 5, the content versus the amount of songs. So we were just kind of getting into this, the idea of how many tracks do you have in the ratio of how much you're saying, given that many tracks. We already talked about it's 14 tracks. They get into some subject matter here, right? It's not all about clones. There's some songs where they talk about other stuff, right?
There's a weed song. There's a I Love For My Hood song.
Mm-hmm.
But this album is kind of missing that they're missing an anthem other than Thug Love. They're missing like that poor anthem. We are talking about how varied the subject matter is. I don't like that's from the other city that starts with a C, and I like weed a lot.
Yeah.
And
it's almost like the war took away from some of that other stuff that you knew Bone for. Like, they don't even rap about weed as much as they did on other albums because they were so consumed by it.
Yeah, and they're not even talking about their homies like that on this album. This was just straight. That's what I'm saying, bro. Like, when they was doing this, I can't imagine what it was like to be young with money, losing the nigga who put you on, your mentor who had the golden ear, bro. Because Easy had an ear, bro, for, like, I don't know if it was him or not, but those beats on Eternal was fire. People on the Come Up flowed beautifully, and I'm not comparing it, but Easy losing that, you know, that was a lot. With money, you know, people's left and right, like, them niggas must have felt like they was at war for real, bro. Like I said in the beginning of this, all over the place, everywhere they went. They must have not been at peace, because all they spoke about on this album was that.
The war. Yeah, I give them credit, because there's tracks like How Many of Us Have Them. They're talking about friendship, and Evil Paradise. It feels like Crazy was trying to shape that song into something real metaphysical, like questioning the path you've chosen. If you anybody's ever taken the time to read the lyrics to that song on reliable sites, because most sites can't track all of our lyrics, especially Busy. Shout out to Busy.
Somebody should hire me, because I can get this accurate. Yo, Apple, hire me. There's so much music out there that have no lyrics, and the lyrics are wrong.
Yeah.
Like, who is writing this stuff?
Yeah.
$100,000 a year. So don't need.
Those songs where they are being topical come at the end of the album. So Let the Law In and Evil Paradise and what did I just mention? How Many of Us Have Them? And then of course the Weed Interlude plays it, and Mo Thugs Family Tree. You get it, but all this is a sequencing matter. Once again, it all comes back to sequencing, because had those things been split up at different parts of the album, then you might have felt like, okay, here's a break from the wartime for this. Here's a break from the wartime for this. But something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. What you're giving this for the content versus the amount of songs.
When you're at war, there's not a lot of different things you can focus on. Therefore, they were at war during this album. There was not a lot of different focuses on this album. I'd give it a 2.5. 2.5, because it was focused on war, bro. There was clones and people with them in the record labels, and police chasing them at a Grammy Award shows. Like, bro, that's what's going on.
Fair enough. That takes us to Dimension 6, the features. Who's on this album?
All right, Tupac. No, my phone's not stuck. That's the only name you know on this album that's not Bone Thugs. Other than that,
come on, you used to know the Bone Thugs roster. Who was
but yo, Soulja Boy is fire, bro. The thing is, man, these cats are deceased, unfortunately, man. From what I've heard, I don't know this for a fact, but I've heard a lot of these people are no longer with us. I don't know what happened to Majesty. Like, he's on a track on that spitting some fire, bro. Who was the cat that was spitting about getting tats on the album? He was talking about the way he was getting tatted. You know, like why he was getting tats. Damn, the boogie down Bronx with a heart still remain.
Yeah.
Well, it's the mob. It's a specialty. Let's find this nigga a job. What's that song? Oh, that's Majesty? Yeah,
that's Majesty. That's Seven.
He spit fire on that. Soulja Boy spit fire on that. Soulja Boy came hard. Not what do you call that with the iPhone ringtone? Soulja Boy.
Yeah, not Big Draco.
He's deceased now, I believe. Not Big Draco.
So to all the kids,
Soulja Boy beforehand.
All the youngins watching, not that Soulja Boy. This is a Soulja Boy that was under the Bone Thugs, Mo Thugs roster, and I've never seen him. I don't know what he looked like, but he had a lot of energy. Let me tell you something about this. You know, we bumped this album on CD, so all these years I've had this song in my rotation, and it wasn't until I revisited it on streaming and all the places that you see the credits where I was like, oh snap, I thought that was Wishbone, and I was so proud because I was like, Wishbone is actually spitting on this verse. He's keeping up. But
that was Soulja Boy.
Because their expressiveness sounds the same. Their tone is similar. You know what it is. You know, he had that little country twang.
Yeah. That's that energy they had. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know what it is. When both of and even
gotta be some crazy. He went wild.
Even the flow that he chose to use sounds like something Wish would have done when Wish wants to put effort into rap fast. Like they're done. But we'll talk about that in the next mission. Yeah, so it's Soulja Boy, Majesty, and the entire roster of the Mo Thugs family at that time. You remember any of those artists by name?
I remember there was somebody named Rena. There was somebody I think named True or Too True or something like that. Damn, bro. There was this other Trey. I don't really remember that name so much.
It's Ken Dog.
Ken Dog. I remember Ken Dog. Yeah, I remember Ken Dog.
I don't. You know, I'll list all the people that are featured on this song, but it was supposed to be like a roll call everybody kind of got like 2 bars, except for Trey, the singing group. They come in and sing multiple parts while
Okay, that was the singers. Okay.
yeah, Crazy and Lazy do their verses in between, and it's supposed to be the introduction. And you know, it's when we talk about do the features help or hurt the album, that's how we rate this on a scale from 1 to 5. Like 1 being that they hurt it, 5 being that it took it over to the top and made it better. That last Mo Thugs part, I don't know if it stands the test of time. Unless you're a diehard Bone fan, for the time being excited about what Bone was going to do next, it's like, ooh, let me hear. But a lot of that stuff, those singers, for instance, were not on key, and it didn't blend well. And
right,
yeah, but
with the exception of that track, I would say the guests were excellent. With the exception of that track. And it's like you said, you know, mixing. It was experimental. But either way, the end result with that track was not that great.
Let's talk about
the Tupac feature.
Yeah, let's talk about legendary.
That's the whole reason we even doing this album is because of this song.
Yeah, let's talk about the legendary Tupac feature, because I think, yeah, you just said it. I don't know if people would consider this album widely to be a classic, or
this album would not have even come out if it wasn't for this song.
It wouldn't have come out. Word on the street
on here that's memorable.
Word on the street is that this song first featured the rapper Silky Fine.
You got some No Limit?
Nah, Silky Fine. She made that song. It's like Romeo and Juliet. Hot sex on the planet. Yeah.
Well. No disrespect to Miss Silky Fine, but you know, Tupac is an upgrade from almost anybody. So no disrespect to her.
So we all know the legend of this song, right? Apparently this was a chance encounter between Busy and Pac. Busy being a huge fan of Pac. I think Busy had began working on his solo album probably around the same time. They agreed to link up and do this track together, and it was just gonna be Busy and Pac. And legend has it, according to Busy Bone, Pac wrote his verse in 1 minute and 51 seconds. Not unbelievable, because Pac, what makes his verse stand out so much is that this is around the time where everybody in the other regions that weren't the Midwest started picking up on this idea, oh, I can do this fast rap thing too, and people were trying it. And of course, the natural inclination when you rap with fast rappers is to try to pick up your pace too, but Pac did his regular flow, even down to the point where he might have even slowed it down more than he usually does, emphasizing every word. And the contrast really made this song pop. So yeah, those are our features. We talked about what Soulja Boy and Majesty add. That was another contrast. You got a New Yorker rapping with the Cleveland rappers, another rapper who chooses to not rap with the fast flow, the contrast. And so all these things are something to consider when you think about, do the features help or hurt the album? On a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats, what you giving this Lil for the features?
I'm giving it damn, this is tough because I want to give it a 4, but there's not that many features. So I'm going to give it a 4 anyway.
Yeah, that's a good thing, right? You got a 5-man group. A lot of groups wouldn't even have features with that many people.
Yeah, man, listen, man, what? The features, the only person you heard of was Pop before.
Yeah.
So
exactly. So they chose wisely. So that takes us to dimension 7, the question of, does the weakest song or do the weakest songs bring the album down? I think at least I have been hinting at this all throughout so far. There are songs here that tip the scales of how dope this album, at least this side, could have been. And you're always at that disadvantage to the hip-hop head community anyway when it comes to double albums, because the haters are lined up waiting to be like, this is whack, it's too many songs. It's really hard to please people with double albums, and this album is no exception. So Lil, what do you think the weakest songs on here are, or the song that you usually skip?
I skip the last song. I definitely skipped the last song. I skip Evil Paradise.
Mm.
I'm a Bone fan. I don't skip that much more.
Okay. I think a lot of people skip Get Your Thug On, which is Wishbone's solo.
Nah, I like that. The Wish Get Me Hype.
There's a lot of Wishbone fans and Bone fans that feel the same way. But if we're listening to that song as
objectively, yeah, I understand. It's not a high caliber song.
It is. The hook is off key. Speaking of off key, the singer and Wish are off key, and that's something that Wish does a lot. Even on Thug Love, on a lot of songs, he goes off and doesn't match his tone with the beat, and it's like, that adds an unpleasant effect or an unprofessional kind of effect to the group that's supposed to be the harmony masters. So that, and if you're not a fan of the interludes or skits, then Blaze It and Neighborhood Slang might be waste. That's all, like Lil pointed out, subjective, and something for you to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. So the way this works is, if the weakest song was weak enough to bring the value of the album down, then it's a 1. There's a lot of albums they're like, man, if they would have just left this one song off, it would have been a classic. If it didn't affect it that much, then it's a 5. So on a scale from 1 to 5, what you giving this for weakest songs?
Giving this a 2.
2. Okay. Yeah. So
it's gotta be a 2 because, I like to listen to. I listen to that because I like Bone Thugs. You know what I'm saying? But it's not. I don't listen to that. I'm like, yo, bars.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
or even sonically hearing.
Right. I was gonna say, or like Kanye beats or something, or my own beats. You know what I mean? I don't listen to it like that. So I listen to it because I want to listen to Bone Thugs and Harmony at the moment.
Yeah, if we were introducing, as 2 fans of Bone, if we were trying to introduce people to Bone who are not fans, we wouldn't play Evil Paradise, Mo Thug, Family Tree, or Get Your Thug On.
Not at first.
Good representation. So something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5.
Not the best representation.
Right. Which takes us to Dimension 8, Mass Appeal.
I gave it a 2 for Tupac.
So Lil's mentioned, the group being in war mentality, and this is the world they know. But we know that Mass Appeal doesn't give a damn about that kind of stuff. Mass Appeal is all about how far-reaching is your product. So when you're thinking about this album, how many legs did it have to stand on commercially?
The album as a whole, World War II.
We can do both. But being that this is this wasn't sold separately, so
As a whole, they apparently they tried with that Batman song.
Yeah,
that was on the Batman soundtrack. That was not it.
Which Busy didn't agree with, and I don't think the song itself is trash. I don't think the song itself has any pop feel to it. I think the video did more damage than the actual song. The song sounds like a Bone song.
Yeah, it does, and they're spitting on the song.
Yeah,
I didn't like the hook or whatever, but other than putting Tupac on the song, I don't think they tried to nothing, bro. I think that they felt they had a cult audience, and if you were a Bone fan, you were gonna with it.
Yeah, and this is the 90s. This is the mid 90s or the end of the mid 90s, going into the late 90s, where it was easy for your core audience to rack up to millions of sales. This album went quadruple platinum in a year that was, I often reference 1997 as the bad boy. It was bad boy pandemonium, and they were able to sell in the midst of all of that. Same effect as Wu-Tang that year, where their core audience is why they sold that many units, because they got little to no radio play. For an album with 28, almost 30 songs, they only had 2 official singles with 2 videos. That's If I Could Teach the World, Look Into My Eyes. Both of those being on the first side. Body Rot was the other single, the B-side single, and that again was on the first side. So literally no singles from this side except for Thug Love, which is not a radio single at all.
I give this a 0.
Wait.
Mass Appeal. They got lucky with a Tupac song because they ran in the pot. They didn't try to sell nobody, like I said.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Crazy Bone was trying his damnedest to make the catchiest hooks. He's responsible for most of the hooks. He's even doing nods to other people's hooks, something that Bone didn't do before. So he's that bring me along. I hope you know we charge it. Like he's trying, but it's still not over tracks that may have swayed it in a direction where even in their hometown, and y'all can leave in the comments, anybody that's from Cleveland, let us know if any other songs from this album got played on the radio or just in the around the way out there. But it wasn't the singles that drove this album. It was the fandom, it was the hype from the previous two albums, and it was the marketing. Everything about this Art of War, I think Lil mentioned before, you had to have like something to make you stand out. It couldn't be a basic rollout. So their whole marketing was like skeletons and shields and swords. The commercial was one of the first like 3D animation commercials I'd ever seen for hip hop.
I still ain't never seen that.
I think this an enhanced CD with like extra features on the CD if you put it in.
I don't think so.
Okay, so this wasn't one of those albums, but this is that era where people were trying to give you extras for albums. I mean, and big budget videos. When the video for If I Could Teach the World came out, that was an event. It was like a world premiere on MTV, I believe.
Was it?
They spent millions on that video.
Give me the money. Let me make the decisions. I would say no. Let's do a Tupac hologram.
Do you remember that video?
I remember the video. I try to forget the video. I didn't know there was no premiere for that. Why would they do that? See, you know what I'm saying? Who was in charge of this?
Everybody was spending millions back then. Remember, Triumph video
And
came
I
out
didn't get
this
any
year.
of that.
Been around the world.
I didn't get any of those millions, Malik.
Yo, just remember the era that we're talking about, right? So like,
and I didn't get any of it.
And for Busy Bone to not be present in either of those singles because he didn't agree, and you could tell the songs Busy didn't rock with. Busy was one of probably the main catalysts for that war mode that they were in because he was with the. There's an interview where he's talking about his feelings about Tamika Wright, who was Eazy-E's widow at the time, where he was talking about how wild his thoughts about her got. And people would try to talk him out of taking action and doing stuff. And he'd be like, "It's only so long, I'm going to sing this moment and not live up to it."
Yo, it's crazy.
So, like,
That's
this is
also, boy, bro.
This is a wild time in Bone Thugs history because this is, you know, as Lil mentioned, right after the death of Eazy-E, which, you know, for as much as he was a mentor, they only knew him for 1 year. So it's a big loss, but I don't know how deep that loss was. What came from it was uglier. The battle with his wife.
I think the depth of that loss was in okaying certain things. Like I remember when you hear, I remember hearing Dame Dash talk about what was this Red Jay-Z album came out?
Kingdom Come.
Was that a Red album? Whatever. Man.
Yeah.
Maybe it was Black. And he was saying, if I would have, you know, I wouldn't have said okay to this beat and that beat and that beat. And I understood what he was saying because those beats do sound hollow. This album missed that touch, bro. It missed that touch. Like this, him and he had the touch.
Yeah.
So it missed that. Like a lot. This album should have been one album called DNA Level C. You know what I mean? One disc.
Yeah, and
fire ass tracks, bro, and you know, but it didn't go that way.
Yeah, the legend is Tamika Wright's hand was all in this project. She changed the arrangement, she changed some beats, changed their songs. She's the reason that If I Could Teach the World was a song. She's the one that has Silky Fine set up for Thug Love, and songs like Evil Paradise exist because of, and you can tell the songs that Busy wanted no parts of because he's not on it. He's not on Evil Paradise. He didn't want to be in the video for Teach the World or Look Into My Eyes. He had stopped promoting the tour and showing up for tour dates and tour spots. This is the beginning of the reputation of Busy Bone as we've come to know it over the years. He's the Bobby Brown of Bone Thugs and Harmony. His father also passed around that time too. So like he was personally, you know, there's always been demons. Busy's been not shy about talking about his demons. He said the music was the safest place for him to express a lot of that anger. So,
Not
and he
Instagram.
also said back in the day, you know, if it was going to be pulled when they were doing street stuff, he would be. So it's best that it came out musically. So that might have been why he was such an engine for the let's go at these other rappers.
Yeah,
Let's
bro.
go at them.
Busy had that. I think Busy had a chip on his shoulder. Like I still think he may have a chip on his shoulder just because of not getting the respect that he feels he deserves. But back then, the fact that he was yellow with a high pitched voice, talking some gangster, test me.
Yeah.
Type shit. You know what I'm saying? Test me. You think it's sweet, sugar free? What's up?
Yeah, and
You
we'll
feel
talk. We'll talk about this. This takes us into the next dimension. But these are all things to consider when we're talking about an album that went quadruple platinum with no obvious radio singles, 2 videos with a core member not showing up,
I bought it twice.
and only 4 releases. And
I bought it twice.
And you bought it twice. So something for y'all to consider on the scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. The mass appeal of this album. What you giving it for mass appeal? You said.
I'm gonna give it a whole heartbeat because you cannot have Tupac anywhere and not say it doesn't have mass appeal. Just the fact that it's Tupac spitting opposite of them, Tupac talking his shit. He caught a plane out to Cleveland late last evening. You know, I think that itself, but other than that, it's a 0. So Tupac holds so much weight that he gives it a whole 1.
It's
true.
true.
We're talking about 28, 29 tracks. Only this song is mass appeal, in my opinion, and it bumps it up a whole notch because it's Tupac.
All right, so that takes us to Dimension 9, my favorite, the 3 I's: impact, innovation, influence. You were talking about, we just touched on something a second ago that I think is important. The story of Busy, right? The chip on the shoulder, the issues with Busy, they kind of remain things of legend because unless you catch certain Busy Bone interviews, you don't get the full story. And so shout out to Jam TV, because I think Busy does a lot of clarifying and explaining in his maturity now from the source. So you don't have to worry about the rumor mill, but the rumor mill fueled the impact of this album back in the day. And unfortunately, some of that legend still follows you no matter how much you've grown. And so we saw in things like the Verses where he threw the water bottle at 3-6 Mafia and Gangsta Boo says something like, "Oh, you must be off your meds again. Old wounds." Speaking of which, can you tell us a little bit about your shirt, bro?
Yeah, man. Yo, this is my man Desi. You know what I'm saying? He's a comedian, very, very funny cat out of Mount Vernon. He made this shirt. I believe this is a 101, to be honest with you. And it's my man Crunchy Back, Ugly. And it just say what Busy said, hey, before we even get started, you ugly ain't finna be mocking me while I'm on the stage.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So I asked for this. My man Desi put me onto this right here.
That's dope. And he showed up ready. And since we're doing t-shirt promo, y'all know already, go to the raproulette.com and get the I used to love her t-shirt. You can get it in any color you want. Just hit me up, let me know. And it's on the raproulette.com, where you should be going anyway to leave your ratings for this album, just like you hear Lil doing right now. All right, and so yeah, that legend of Busy Bone is one of the things that remain. For better or worse, it keeps Bone relevant in a way. But it began with this album where we started hearing murmurs of, where's Busy at? Is the group breaking up? Why is he not showing up? So that's a negative impact, but it's an impact regardless. And then just the Tupac factor, as Lil was talking about, can't be denied. This unfortunately came out a year after Tupac's death, 1 month before the month of his death. And people were clamoring for new material. There were all these Machiavelli mixtape albums out there hitting the streets, and people heard the buzz about there being an unreleased Tupac and Bone Thugs and Harmony song. And as much as I hate mentioning the two of these guys in the same breath, off the heels of what Bone showed on Notorious Thugs earlier that year on the posthumous Biggie album, people were thirsty to hear what they would do with his enemy, right? So it's like, oh snap, it was almost too good to be true. It's like, what are the odds that this same group did a song with the two biggest beefing rappers who are no longer with us, and we're just now hearing them in this year 1997? Big move. Big move. It made it highly anticipated. They knew that. They used it in that little 3D commercial that I was talking about. So there was like one commercial that had the Retaliation song. So it'd be like, Retaliation.
I do remember that, yeah.
And then there was one commercial that had Pac's voice with the electric live wire sign in the background. From Cleveland, LA, right?
Mm-hmm.
So those things all factored in the impact. And me, you know, we could speak to how it impacted us as teens, man. You remember the feeling? This album dropping?
Yeah, I remember being in my room. I needed to be dolo to hear this because I was so excited. And I remember I really wanted to love it, and I didn't love it, and I was trying to make excuses for why. And I'm like, oh, and same thing with you. I was like, oh, this should have been here, this should have been there. Like, why is this there? This doesn't sound right. But I did love it because it has really good songs on this album. There are some really, really good songs, and there's some songs that you're just like, damn, this shit could have been left off.
I remember Lil coming to the cafeteria in high school with write-outs of the lyrics.
I would write that.
And then trying to, on that same Discman that he's talking about, trying to get me to listen, and I wasn't yet a full fan. So I'd be like, I don't really want to listen to something I don't really know what they saying. And you're like, nah, you gotta hear this song called Body Rock. Listen to how Busy's going off on Body Rock. So I mean, we were on it. I was a big fan, bro, because it was so different, and the fact it was different and it wasn't whack, bro. And
it was dope.
As people outside of this region where it's native, right? If you are not from the Midwest, this is all new to you anyway. So there have been age-old debates. You see all these documentaries come up now, and they tell you how like this style originated in Memphis or this style originated in Chicago. But to us, it really did feel like Bone came back to reclaim their spots. On the East Coast and West Coast, it just, Bone was who we knew this style most prominently from. So we were riding with them. And almost like how freestyling or rap itself was still special in the 90s, this was special. If you were one of those people that understood Bone lyrics, you were like popular in your circle. They'd be like, yo, tell me what they saying. But so that's the impact, man. Bone was a leading act. If this wasn't the Bad Boy year, Bone would be plastered everywhere, despite whatever was going on with Ruthless Records and their beef.
They did this thing though.
Their internal beef. Now, innovation, again, I mentioned that 3D animated video commercial to promote the album. That was innovative. The video for If I Could Teach the World, as much money as they spent, it did its thing. It was very innovative. It was some real crazy imagery that we hadn't seen in hip hop before.
The actual CDs itself, obviously they have a hole in it, so it looked like a bullet hole, and it had like art, like bullet splatter, I guess you were saying, around it. So it looked like that. That was pretty cool. I was like, oh, that was kind of cool.
As far as influence, what we say is the influence of this album.
The influence? What do you mean by that?
Like
did this have an influence on others?
On hip hop or on others?
No.
For generations to come?
No, only Thug Love.
Only Thug Love. Okay, yeah, I've heard a lot of beats with gun sounds in it, and they just cemented that fast rap and being comfortable singing and rap. Before we had a word or a term for singing and rap, Bone were doing it. This album was the emergence of Crazy just straight up singing. On the first two albums, they were kind of masking it.
He went real orchestral on this.
He did. If I would have to say anything in the way of influence, they were part of that wave of, oh, it's another rap group trying to start their own label, and everybody used to get hyped. I remember around this time, back to the source, every rap act was launching their own label. Even if they were still signed to a bigger label, they were putting their imprint on the back of it. So Bone was a part of that wave. Throughout this album, you hear Lazy trying to push Mo Thugs. I mean, the agenda start becoming clear. Busy was war-minded. Lazy was Mo Thugs. Crazy was like, let me try to hold this group together. And Wish was like, y'all call me when y'all need me on the track. Those spirits were really evident in their forward personalities. And Flesh was just happy to be back on tracks. But this year, Flesh also had his solo album. So, yeah.
Wasn't it before this? Nah, bro. He had a solo album. I remember I went to Woolworth and got that.
Wow, Woolworth. That's crazy. So his album dropped before this.
Yeah, he had songs with Montel Jordan.
Yeah, he had the song with Rev Run. That was the main single.
Yeah, okay.
Oh no, why? It came out the end of '96.
Okay, I knew it was before this.
It came out the same time that it came out when Machiavelli came out. It was around then. But
all right, so yeah, what we giving this?
So yeah, when it comes to impact, innovation, and influence, something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats. Lil, what we giving this?
Nah, we give it a 2. We give it a 2 because the artwork was crazy. It was very theme oriented. He had Tupac on the song, a very innovative beat.
Yeah, and it added to the legacy of them being the triplet flow rappers that other rappers, even if they don't give it credit, they can say they know they heard it before somewhere because it was in the atmosphere because of this album. Just furthering that legacy. All right, that takes us to the final dimension 10, the overall timelessness and uniqueness of this album.
Timelessness and uniqueness. It's unique. It's not timeless unless you're a fan, but it is unique.
Yeah, that might be the best way to put it. Shout out to DJ U-Neek. But yeah, timeless. A lot of the beats, I think, have a cringe element to it because of how basic some of that production is. And I think you hit it on the nose where it sounded like U-Neek was familiarizing himself with his soundboard. And the result of that is the audience are the test subjects to all this experimentation. Crazy was doing experimentation all throughout this album, and you could feel it. You could feel this idea, but we're already successful. We can spread our wings a little further. Crazy said that this is his favorite. He thinks this is the best Bone Thugs album out of their whole discography because they sat down in the studio together and wrote together and made it then and there. But I think you mentioned that money thing. I think same thing that Wu-Tang went through. Oh, let's all fly out to LA and record this album. It's going to give you a different vibe than when you hungry coming from the projects. This your first shot and you put everything
that
into
should save their life. At the end of the day, when you look at it, like these 5 men, these 5 black men changed the whole trajectory of their families, of their lineage moving forward. You know what I'm saying? They're giving their children and their children's children a head start because they put out a So album in 1997 that kept them alive and out the hood and out of prison forever. And you know what I mean? This is a dope story. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, the Grammy Award-winning Bone Thugs and Harmony at this point, but you have to imagine there's a comfort level that seeps into the. Yeah, the fact that Crazy thinks that this is their best album though is wild to me because it just.
So Crazy, I want to talk. You should ask him now. See if we can get Crazy Bone on the show.
I look forward to interviewing Busy and Crazy. Shout out to my fellow Libra Lazy, and shout out to the whole Bone Collective. That's something to consider on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats when we talk about the overall uniqueness and timelessness of what you're giving it.
I'm giving it a 2. 2 heartbeats because of its uniqueness. Not timeless music, but definitely unique. You definitely know who you're listening to. Sounded like nothing else at the time or after.
Okay, well put. Yeah, so that concludes our Category 1 review of the classic, and it's up to y'all to determine how classic is this classic. It might be a low-level classic, but it's up to you. Join us for part 2, where we go over the rap performance, the actual rap breakdown, and how Bone was attacking these tracks. And until then, you already know what it is. F a Rap Critic. They talk about it while I live it. Word to meth.